Good afternoon. My name is Aldwyn Wayne. I am the CEO and founder of WiPay Caribbean. We recently founded Color Bank, which is a neobank based out of Miami, Florida. WiPay Caribbean is the Caribbean's largest payment platform with operations in 19 countries in the Caribbean and 2 offices in South America, Guyana and Suriname. As I mentioned, we started our US operations about 6 months ago, and with the purpose of providing payment services to the diaspora population in the US. And while we were working on getting these Caribbean diaspora population or demographic of people on board, we realized that in the US, the Caribbean diaspora population and the African diaspora population was one and the same. At least the connotation was, right? There were no difference. And if you think about it, there is no difference, right? In the 1500s, about 10 million Africans from West Africa was, visited to the Caribbean, to provide services. And if you look at it, the Caribbean is made up of a population that's 80% African or Pan-African and from West Africa. We're just a little further west. As I like to joke in our office, we're the West Africa, because in the Caribbean, 80% of that population comes from right here in West Africa. So that being said, if we look the same, talk the same, have the same culture, how do we incorporate trade? Trade between a region that is African and a region that comes from Africa, right? Looking back at our history, we had this, trade, this triangle trade, or triangular trade that they call it. They taught us in school. In the Caribbean, we call it the Middle Passage. It's where slaves boarding onto a New England ship would leave West Africa, reach into the Caribbean, dump there, they would work the cane fields, sugar fields, and then molasses and rum would make it all the way up to New England, but the slaves would stay. The profits would stay in New England, and some of the rum will make it back to Africa or West Africa to purchase more slaves. But in the Caribbean, we call this the Middle Passage. In the US, they call it the triangle trade. But really and truly, what it meant was slaves from Africa worked the fields in the Caribbean, but the profit went to New England, North America. And it could have been the New World, it could have been the Old World. The triangle still remains the same. Work came from Africa to the Caribbean, profits went to England or the US. And I want you guys to remember that triangle trade, because that still exists today in the payment space. There's no direct line of payment or trade that goes from Africa to the Caribbean without it stopping in the US or stopping in the UK first. It's called corresponding banking. If I need to pay someone in the Caribbean, I can't send them money directly. If I need to pay for something here in Africa, I can't send money to them directly. We're opening an office in Africa, in Ghana. And I can tell you, everything goes through a corresponding bank. But we are doing some tests right now that doesn't incorporate a corresponding bank, but I'll get to that later. So I could show you, and the triangle shows you that from the 1500s to now, when it comes to trade, when it comes to payments, we still have this big brother approach where things have to go through either the US or the UK. But I'm here today to say we're going to change that. And we're going to change that with technology, right? We're going to change that with technology that allows FinTech organizations in Africa to talk to FinTech organizations in the Caribbean. Sorry, Mr. Kapinda. Regulated FinTech organizations. So Kamel just walked in, and she's working with the Bank of Ghana to onboard FinTechs into their sandbox. So let me fix up my chat, as we say in the Caribbean. Regulated FinTech entities in Africa can now directly connect to regulated FinTech entities in the Caribbean through this platform, right? And this platform, we've dubbed it, and we probably need to change the name because it's Caribbean-centric, is a Caribbean settlement platform. I'll stop a bit so I can let this video play, and we'll kind of give you an explanation of what the Caribbean settlement platform looks like. And then we could jump into it a little bit further about how FinTech organizations, not only in Africa, but around the world, will be able to access the Caribbean via a single API. So if you have that queued up, Mark, there you go. There's audio on this one, right?
The Caribbean. 16 countries. Connected in every way, but financially disconnected. This region possesses 10 unique currencies but no inter-island settlement. In the Caribbean, transactions originated in Trinidad needs to go to a correspondent bank in the US before it settles into another country. But this can be solved. Introducing WiCoin. WiCoin is a stablecoin being developed by WiPay for use within its network of over 50,000 websites and point-of-sale terminals across the Caribbean that processes individual, government, and corporation transactions. WiPay's privately owned network has created a unified settlement network for the Caribbean, called the Caribbean Settlement Network. This solves one of the greatest financial problems that exists in the Caribbean: cross-border settlement. Each Caribbean country has their own currency that trades primarily with the US dollar. By pegging the WiCoin to the US dollar, transactions from one country to another can maintain the expected value, because local currencies maintain its value against the US currency. WiCoin is a stablecoin that exists on WiPay's network that would facilitate inter-island transactions without the need for correspondent banking. WiCoin, through its partnership with WiPay, would replace WiPay's digital fiat solutions, which is utilized by a number of governments and private sector entities across the Caribbean immediately, giving WiCoin real-world value. WiCoin stablecoin can also solve interbank USD settlement by creating a real-time settlement rather than 2 to 5 day wire transfers. But how does WiCoin solve this? The WiCoin is a smart contract built on a proof-of-stake distributed ledger system, where the owner of the WiCoin earns a fraction of every transaction.
These virtual assets in parallel with the monies. One, nobody could have control that you have to pass it to a corresponding bank.
WiCoin is registered in the island nation of Grenada, which just passed legislation to regulate digital currencies. This stablecoin, paired with WiPay's Caribbean payment network, shall create the Caribbean's first unified currency.
So that platform, as I think I see him just now. Pete, are you here? There you go. So I promised you I was going to shout you out. So that platform was actually built on Hedera's distributed ledger technology. Something that we've looked at before in terms of a platform that would allow us to easily do transfers, keep the pricing down, because this thing is built for us. And I'll get into what us means later on, but it's built for us, right? So, we're not gonna have fees jump up out of the blue, because, network, velocity went up. If I wanna send 5 CD, 1 CD, that's what we do, right? And that price should be understood, should remain the same. And Hadira provided us with a solution that would ensure that our customers and our customers' customers would be able to conduct transatlantic transactions with fees cheaper than doing a transaction with someone in person. You know, those mobile payment stuff. I'm not calling any names. But yeah, transatlantic transactions. While I'm shutting people out, I have Felix from Katani Pay. We're working with them to actually do the first live transaction, right here in Ghana. Already shouted out MTech, who works with the Bank of Ghana, works with FinTech companies to help manage our onboarding process and guarantee that customers satisfy their regulatory needs in their respective jurisdictions. So that being said, what we are offering to not only Ghana, Africa, but any regulated fintech is the ability to connect to the Caribbean to help increase transactions, not only of your network, but any fintech that exists on our network. A couple of months ago, I was in Washington, D.C. At the annual Bankers Conference. And they got me on stage right after the people from Swift. Hang on. Is anyone here from the Swift network? Okay, good, because I want to bad talk them. So they got me on stage right after the people from the Swift network. Their big announcement was Swift 2.0. And I'm hoping that most people in here is fintech companies, so this resonates with you guys. And the bankers, I apologize, but it's our time. So in DC, Bankers Conference, I'm not even sure how I got there. And Swift was presenting Swift 2.0. And so by 2025, we could have close to real-time settlement across borders. And then I came on stage. And, again, I'm a millennial, and, I'm not too good with managing the room, managing conversation. I just kind of speak like I'm doing right now. My speechwriter is probably pulling their hair out because I'm not saying nothing that's on that thing. But that's what I do. And Swift just, messed up my whole way of thinking because I had a whole speech prepared to sound banky and like a banker. But I got on stage and said, hey, Swift, we're doing this right now in the Caribbean. And, we can move money between 19 jurisdictions, 19 countries instantly. And we don't use the Swift network. We don't need to wait until 2025 because that's when Swift 2.0 is going to come out. And I bring that up because now is the time. Now is the time for fintech organizations to understand that we have an opportunity to work together and create our own rails that not only extend between cities in Africa or within towns in Africa, it extends across the world. And all we need to do is connect to each other. And that's what, and as the Caribbean Settlement Network, we got to work on that name, but that's the value of the Caribbean Settlement Network. It's so that fintech companies using technology, again, being regulated, can now create our own highways of exchange, our own rails that allows us to provide payments, transfers, and settlement at a cheaper rate than any of these legacy solutions can provide. Thank you. So I actually still have 5 minutes. I'm all for questions if anyone has any.
Hello? Okay.
Hi.
Thanks for your speech. My name is Lakeisha Marie. I'm Jamaican American. And so shout out, Caribbean shout out. I love what you're doing, and this is definitely something that I'm super passionate about in terms of connecting the Caribbean to Ghana. I think a lot of times the Caribbean, we think our solutions are in America or the UK, but a lot of the solutions are right here in Africa and vice versa. So congratulations on that. Now my question to you is, how how has your experience been linking in other Caribbean countries in terms of their sandbox or lack thereof, and in terms of the systems being more bank-led, and the fact that the banks are very analog in some of the Caribbean countries. So can you talk a little bit about, I guess, getting adoption across the Caribbean?
Sure. Thank you. That's a good question. And again, shout out to Jamaica, Yadi in the house. So it's, we took a different approach. It's not a one-size-fits-all for the Caribbean. Every island has their own identity. And what we did in Trinidad, for example, we found what was a pain point for the decision makers, the regulators, the government, and that was court pay. Making payments online was very difficult. So we focused our efforts in developing a platform for the judiciary, who actually write laws, and then they pass 2 laws for us to get court pay working. And then we went to Jamaica. And this was just during COVID, and the government wanted to shut down the country. We were like, okay, the only systems that will be working would have been the, food companies that were headed by multinational organizations. So we went to the Prime Minister and we developed ENDS. I'm not too sure if you know ENDS. Yeah, we built this platform that allowed the pan chicken man, the jerk man, everyone the ability to sell from their home, because we give e-commerce for free. We actually won a Guinness World Record for that. You could Google it. We won the Guinness World Record for the most number of websites given out in one day, 1,000. But again, we then got the blessings of the Prime Minister, the government, and the regulators. Oh, you cool. So I guess to answer your question, we didn't have a solution that we came to provide to any country. We found out what the pain points was, and we built a solution to fit. Once we started getting regulated by all these regulators and they started using our service, we started adding what we actually wanted. It's a Trojan horse, maybe, I guess you could say. Tactic. Oh yeah, you can clap for that. Scheming. we schemed them.
No, my question is, how do you see WiPay and other fintechs being able to utilize each other's platforms to essentially make this something that really can work worldwide?
For sure. That's the end game. For us, it's not about WiPay. As I just explained, we did what was necessary for adoption. Last night, Andrew, I'm not too sure if he's here, we said, Andrew, that's ZPay. We need you on the platform. We've been talking for about a year. Katani Pay, guys I just met. I'm bad with names. But about 4 or 5 African companies, we said, listen, you're regulated, jump on. This is not about one fintech company providing payouts. We would have some customers. But if we're all connected, then we can have all customers. 1% of your transaction is still better than 0% of transactions that we don't have part of. So I kind of link it to the banking system before ACH or credit unions, that's not connected. You could have all the money in the world, but if your bank card only works at your ATM, it's not going to provide you the service you want. But the second that your bank is now linked to every other bank, and the ACH networks allow you to go from your point to someone else's point in ATM and use their service, that interconnectivity is how you grow or blow up the market. So for WiPay, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be that network that allows every fintech to talk to each other, just by providing a simple API. Does that answer your question? Cool.
Great, solid presentation. We will soon go to our next panel session of the day, but first, I too have questions, even though I'm the MC. To begin, what are your plans for the massive adoption of WiPay for example, here in Ghana or in West Africa at large, looking at the landscape where you are competing with, other more traditional products and maybe the massive amount of money that they have for advertisement. So what are your plans? So that's question number one. Question number two, have you identified challenges for establishing WeCoin as a stable coin that will be used for peer-to-peer transactions between Ghana and, let's say, the Caribbean? And are there people in this room that might be useful to address those challenges?
Sure. Good questions. To answer your first point, the goal is not to come in to compete. There are enough solutions in market that provides value to the Ghanaian public and to greater Africa at large. What we're trying to do is provide connectivity to those existing wallets, money providers, e-money providers, issuers, to Western markets, local providers that's on our platform, connectivity. That's our goal, that's our game, especially in a market that is mature as the Ghanaian one when it comes to FinTech and technology solutions. So it's not to come in to compete, it's come in to provide a platform for connectivity, collaboration, right? In terms of the WeCoin, because of this summit, we presented it as the value that it is. But for the rest of the world, this is something that's more likely going to be invisible in terms of the platform, right? You're not going to be able to buy a WeCoin right away. These are assets that is fixed by initial investors and follow-up investors. It's not going to be available in any public ledger. So we presented the WeCoin because this audience would be able to appreciate what it is. But from a general public standpoint, the settlement network is just going to be a settlement network that you plug into, and you would see CD going on one side and Jamaican dollars come out on the next. Make sense?
Makes sense. Makes
All
sense. Cool. Yeah, so I guess this answers our first two questions. The other question I had is what challenges you have maybe identified to roll out this amazing project in Ghana or in West Africa, and if maybe there are some people from traditional finance that might be helpful to help address this, because this whole summit is really about networking and discussing things to accelerate the way forward.
So from a WiPay standpoint, we've submitted on MTech's platform for Bank of Ghana to pitch our solution to the central bank. But again, the goal is for regulated entities here in Ghana to make sure that they have the permission, non-objection, or the approvals from their regulator to put this into market, right? So yes, we are setting up a WiPay entity here. We would speak to the regulators about what we're trying to do. But our goal, again, is to get local players who's already regulated on board versus us coming to market with a specific product.
Awesome approach. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Awesome. A round of applause for Mr. Aldwyn.